First, there was the higher tax that was introduced in the budget that spooked investors and businesses, and now a new law that basically penalizes companies for defaulting on corporate social responsibility requirements has evoked strong reactions. So in the amendments to the Companies Act, basically there are now violations of the CSR, as it's called, will attract both fines and even jail time for the company and for defaulting officers. Fines range from 50,000 rupees to 25 lakhs. Officers are also liable to go to jail for up to 3 years. Unspent money from the CSR fund has to be transferred to an escrow account for 3 financial years. And the law also now enables the Serious Fraud Investigation Office to ensure that it is speedily and effectively enforced. Now, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said in Parliament that legitimate profit earning cannot be devoid of social responsibility, and that companies cannot get away without meeting corporate social responsibility requirements. The CSR rules, by the way, were first introduced by the UPA government in 2013 and require companies with a certain net worth and turnover to spend 2% of their average profit of the previous 3 years on corporate social responsibility activities. But what has changed now are the penalties that have come in as far as CSR is concerned, and that is why it has drawn such a sharp reaction. Vaishali Nigam Sinha, who is the chairperson of the Renew Foundation, joins us from Gurgaon this evening. Also, Mr. Nitin Desai is here with us, the former Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India. Tavleen Singh stays with us, so does Mr. Vivek Reddy, and Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist of Care Ratings, joining us from Mumbai shortly. Vaishali Sinha, to you first. What are your thoughts on these new rules that have come in?
Yeah, hi Nidhi, thanks for having me on your show. There are 2 ways to look at the new laws which have come in. One is that, there is a policy framework which was introduced in 2013, and I'm glad to see that, there is a monitoring of how it's going, what's going well and what's not going well. And so while we are talking about the penalties, and I'll come to that later, I really do think we should also look at what is the good this amendment is doing. I think for one, it's giving corporates the flexibility to roll over, which was required, and is going to help corporates do better quality CSR work. It's also giving, bringing in some discipline, because, the fact does remain that there were some corporates who were, either reporting or just reporting and getting away. And to that extent, I think the amendment does bring in some discipline to ensure that the implementation is done with in the right spirit. I was a little bit surprised to see the penalties. I'm a firm believer that CSR really is something which should come from the heart. It has to be done in a way where you're looking for the impact, and really coercion or penalties is not the way to go. And so there are many other ways in which we can positively engage and motivate corporates.
So in principle a good idea, but it's the penalties, the coercion, as you say, that you don't agree with. Mr. Desai, is that really at the heart of this?
I suspect that's what is at the heart of it. I think to some extent the problem is that the government often has a rather misleading picture of the corporate sector. You think in terms of a few big corporations which are making a lot of money, which are very visible. But for every one corporation like that, I assure you that at least half a dozen which are semi-sick or semi-sick. Remember, we have about 5,000 quoted companies in this country, and barely you can say that maybe not more than 100 of these would be the visible corporate thing. So when you start making rules for all of them, you are thinking in terms of a handful of companies and trying it to apply to others. Now, more generally, I personally was never very much in favor of the CSR provision. If the government
on principle?
Yes, because if the government thinks some certain activities need to be done, let them do it.
It shouldn't be the responsibility of private companies.
The private companies are supposed to run their companies efficiently and effectively. They are not supposed to do the work which government ought to be doing, or setting up schools, looking after people's health, repairing the environmental damage, etc., etc. So I have some problems even with the very idea. But suppose you do it, then I would say that once you do it, I suppose you have to have some mechanism of enforcement. But I think they have already, the corporate sector in India right now is in a very, very
exactly what I was
depressed
coming
state.
to, Tavleen. Is this, you think, going to dampen that sentiment, which anyway is a bit jittery after all this, the taxation announced in the budget, everything that's happened with the Cafe Coffee Day story since yesterday has also certainly been a setback. Does this add to that?
Yes, but the thing that I would like to say right at the outset is I don't believe that you can force corporations to do social responsibility. I think that it should never have been done. It's probably unconstitutional. And I'm surprised that nobody has taken it to court, because who is government which defaults on all its own schemes, which is which really hasn't done what it we can't give our people drinking water. It's still not something that government can do, and you force some corporation who often government doesn't pay for work that is done for them, and you force them to do this, and now you're going to say you're going to jail them. And I did a column last weekend, I don't know whether you saw it on Sunday, where I said, I live in Mumbai, and believe me, I have rarely seen a moment in Indian corporate history that has been gloomier. People are totally without hope that they will ever be able to do business freely in India. On top of that, now you're going to jail them for not doing social responsibility.
Is that supremely ironic? I mean, given that there were very different expectations from Mr. Modi and his mandate,
yes,
that he'd be good for business.
Yes, I think that actually, when in 2014 they thought that he was going to become, Margaret Thatcher or Ronald Reagan and really withdraw government from the interference in business. Instead of that, you've got an Inspector Raj already that exists. Now those inspectors, do you know that an income tax officer can arrest people under the laws that have now been made? Do you want the private sector to die?
Well,
these are companies we should be proud of. The fact that Tata can buy Jaguar, the fact that, Anil Agarwal is one of the biggest metal traders in the world. We're not proud of them, we're treating them like criminals.
Well, Madan Sabnavis, the counter, just to play the devil's advocate here, would be that, we are in a unique situation in India. Yes, the government has to do what it has to do to build roads, infrastructure, etc., and to do its part on social responsibility, but that we have a moral responsibility, all of us, to contribute to that nation building. Does that argument hold?
No, I think when you talk of moral responsibility, I think it's something which should be totally voluntary. And I think there's always been a very strong argument against CSR, because corporate is supposed to work for the shareholders and make money for them. And as far as the government is concerned, I think we have a tax system. We have a number of cesses which are being put on corporates. And I think if the government is not able to do most of its functions in the right manner, expecting corporates to go ahead and do it, I think is a bit far-fetched. So I think this kind of a clause will definitely become more onerous for companies. And as I think the entire panel agrees that the corporate sector is going through tough times, and to top it all, if we're going to say that somebody's going to get arrested or the company is going to be fined, I think it's going to definitely affect the morale of the companies. But now that this thing has come into place, I think companies will have to be devoting more time, not just to get all the other cases which keep coming along the way, especially if you look at the financial sector. If you're a bank, for example, you already have the NPA issue, you have the CBC, you have the CBI after you. To top it all, you'll say you'll have another department coming after you, saying that you have not met your CSR targets. So in short, I would say this is actually the responsibility of the government. If at all the private sector wants to do it, I think lots of them are doing it on a voluntary basis. Asking every company to do it, to my mind, is slightly onerous, but I suppose we have to live with it.
Well, of course, the irony, Nitin Desai, here is that this was, as we said right at the beginning, introduced by the UPA in 2013. There were no penalties that were there. Does it surprise you that the government decided to continue and actually to add these penalties, this government?
I think what lies behind this is that the persistent sense of distrust between the political class and the business class continues. It has not gone. This is what this is, what it ultimately reflects. As I repeat, I think the original proposal from the UPA was itself not a very sound idea. Today, as a private individual, if I give charity, I get an ATG deduction, but it's voluntary. Tomorrow, for all I know, after this, they will put in a law saying that if my income is above this and if I didn't give so much to charity, I can be fined. If you want me to tax us higher, tax us and use that money for what you want.
Yeah,
but
it's supposed to be a democracy.
Yeah, you want to tax us, tax us, fine.
How can you
Good.
have
but
politicians telling you what
today,
to do?
I don't have a. I know there are corporations which are doing excellent work under the CSR. One small suggestion I would make to the government, if they are willing to listen, is that frankly there are a limited number of corporations which really have the resources and the capacity and the organizational ability to use CSR well. Why don't you do this? Start giving them CSR credits for anything they do more than what they are required to do. And the other fellows who are not really, frankly, trying to rescue their corporations from bankruptcy can buy those credits and then cover them. That's just something to make something out of a bad
I think one of the problems has been, the fact is, yes, know, as Mr. Desai said, this is something we have, or as Tavleen also said, this is something we have to live with. It's there. Now, we had seen those reports of how CSR money that was earmarked for PSUs, for example, was diverted for the Statue of Unity building. I mean, that's hardly corporate social responsibility. There are other reports of how companies try to dodge these targets all the time, and which is why the government says, look, it's there, it's in the law, and we just now need to ensure that it's enforced from their perspective. But at the same time, diverting money for building statues ain't exactly CSR, is it?
Exactly. No, I totally agree with you, Nidhi. The point is that my belief is that if you have to do CSR, it really does have to come from from within, and we all have to understand that at the end of the day, doing CSR, etc., does contribute to the bottom line. And I think it's that messaging and that nudge which is very important for the government probably to give. And we have to recognize there's 60% of the corporates who are actually complying, and it's about 40% who are not. I'd also like to point out
a big number.
That since 2013, CSR spend has been. Yeah, it's a big number. I also want to say, so since over the last 5 years, corporates have spent close to 50,000 crores cumulatively over the last 5 years on CSR. It's not a small amount. And the problem is that, corporates don't necessarily implement these programs themselves. They rely extensively on NGOs. And unfortunately, the NGOs don't have the absorption capacity. So there are systemic issues which need fixing for us to be able to do good quality, impactful CSR work. And I think if we focus on that, the government focuses on providing hand-holding and helping in that area, we are probably going to be able to really address the spirit of the act which had come out in 2013. I don't disagree with, as I said, checking what's going well, how can we better implement some of these laws, but just going to the other extreme of penalties and kind of in a way forcing people to do CSR, I don't think it's going to really work. I also believe that we need to work on certain areas which are really going to add value to the implementation. For example, we have a 5% limit on overhead spend for CSR. There is no direction for volunteerism, etc. Now, given the bandwidth issue the NGOs have, if the corporates can invest and spend on training and building some capacity in their teams to be able to do CSR work, and it can be counted towards the CSR spend, I think we'll be able to contribute much better for more impactful CSR work. Our experience at Renew has just been unbelievable in terms of just doing CSR work, which has been precise.
So some constructive suggestions coming from you and Mr. Desai there.
At the end of,
Mr. Sabnavis, just the last comments from everyone. When you add this development up with, the whole issue of tax terrorism, income tax authorities getting more power, etc., what does that do to the spirit of sort of businesses at the moment? The economy is down. Is this going to kill it?
Yeah, I think the timing of such an act is definitely not good for the corporate sector. And what we have seen is that several policies which have been brought in including, if I just make a slight deviation, if you look at the entire thing concerning the automobile sector, suddenly you say that the registration cost goes up, the insurance cost goes up, just at a time when the industry is actually almost dying. I think the timing is something which the government could have looked at to make sure that the corporates are already grappling with several other issues. And as you've rightly mentioned, there's definitely an economic slowdown. Now, us burdening them with another additional thing, especially the threat of going to jail, I don't think it will be good for the overall sentiment.
Tavleen, if you had a suggestion to make, an appeal to make, what would it be?
Well, for a start, I would say that the penalties should be removed forthwith. I think it's wrong. It's against the spirit of India's democracy. It's against the constitution to force people to do something.
But that was there anyway, from the UPA's time.
It was wrong then, and now it's got wronger still. I don't believe that at any point they should have done that. A corporation's responsibility, as somebody said, is to its shareholders. A corporation's responsibility is to create wealth for India. It is government's responsibility to do CSR, and they've been sadly wanting, and now they're trying to outsource it. It's wrong.
Does it become bad to be wealthy in India?
Oh, it's a crime.
Oh, that's always been bad.
It's a crime.
It's always been bad.
No, but now it's a crime. No, we went through a good period, but now it's almost socialism 2.0 or 4.5 or something.
Who would have thought that that's what
I
we
think
would be saying about
I
the
don't even
government?
think they do this in Marxist countries.
They should focus more on understanding how government's responsibilities can usefully use the private sector. Let me give you one old example. When initially condoms were being introduced into India in the family planning program, they had to reach a lot of people in remote areas. A group of companies which were involved in marketing, like things like matchboxes and cigarettes, cooperated with the government in getting that stuff out there because they had the system, the distribution system. Now that's sensible.
Yeah.
Because you're using a capacity which they
You
have.
get, for instance, these Coca-Cola, people who, not Coca-Cola, whatever it is, those big multinational companies that you see.
Are you missing Manmohan Singh right now?
Why? No.
Are you missing him?
No.
On the economy, no?
I miss Narasimha Rao. I think Narasimha Rao was really on the right track. But for instance, they can. That's a very good suggestion. For biscuits can be made more nutritious. Because they have the ability to
use the capacity they have.
Exactly.
Anyway,
don't kill it.
Interesting, and you know what? There's a lot of data still coming out on the economy. The core sector data that came out today, not very encouraging. There's more data coming out tomorrow. Let's see where it takes us. But all of this, as all of you by and large agree, hurts that business sentiment further. Thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. We'll take a break. More on the other side.